Hello, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Thank you for tuning in to this webinar. Full disclosure, sometimes you try some things and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. And this webinar is a case of that. I put it out there. Nobody registered, so I'm here by myself. But it is what it is. I'm going to learn some lessons from that and try to figure out how I can improve, how I can make this um, more desirable to people and get people to want to join in. So in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and put it on my YouTube channel, which if you're watching this, that's probably where you're watching it, and let people see it for free. And probably moving forward, I will just plan to do it for free and then ask for maybe donations of whatever people are willing to give. And if they don't give anything, that's fine too. But we're here today and I'm going to go ahead and record this and we'll put it out on the YouTube channel. And what we're talking about today is coyote myths. This is one of those things I always say. I don't always argue with strangers on the internet. When I do, it's usually about coyotes. Coyotes, there's a lot of myths and a lot of misconceptions and a lot of things about coyotes that people share as fact that probably aren't fact. They're very misunderstood. They're beautiful creatures. I love them. In fact, this picture that you're seeing now is the coyote that lives not far from my house. And so I got this picture one day when he was standing on a hillside. So this is a quote, and actually Barry Lopez wrote this about wolves. He said, "We know little about wolves, but a great deal about what we believe wolves to be." But we can apply this even more so to coyotes because coyotes are probably the largest predator that most of us are likely to encounter. So we hear them, they're very mysterious when we hear them yipping and howling. And people share a lot of things about coyotes, like I said, that are probably not true. And there's a lot of prejudice. And we use I say we, but people, especially anti-coyote people, they use a lot of loaded language, or there's just a lot of loaded language embedded into our discussion about coyotes when we talk about coyotes. So this is a quote from the Nextdoor app from when I lived in Nebraska. This person said, "Everybody walking on Camp Gifford Road, beware. This morning on my walk, I saw a coyote stalking me." Now, to put this into a little bit of context, Camp Gifford Road ran behind my house. It was a gravel road, a dead end gravel road. On the one side of Camp Gifford Road was houses. It was residential. On the other side of this road was Fontenelle Forest Nature Center, which was 1,500 plus acres of oak woodlands and wetlands and just wonderful habitat for a lot of things, including coyotes and foxes and turkeys. And Camp Gifford Road dead ends at a state wildlife management area, which is another 11 or 1,200 acres of lowland wetlands and woods and river frontage. So to see a coyote in this area should not have been that big of a surprise. But this person said there was a coyote stalking me. Now, that word stalking is kind of one of those loaded words. Was the coyote stalking him, or did he just see a coyote? But this other person chimed in, "How big was the pack?" And I always find that amusing because he said, I don't know, I didn't stick around to find out. So he saw one coyote, but now we've got the whole pack in there hiding somewhere out of sight. And this person said, "I'm always afraid of encountering one when I go out to my car early in the morning, that or a mountain lion." Now, I will say mountain lions show up in the greater Omaha area about once every 10 years. So this person's chances of encountering a mountain lion when they go out to their car early in the morning, extraordinarily low. Here in Cheyenne, I've actually seen well, I didn't see the second mountain lion. I saw one road-killed mountain lion right off base and one My wife saw one live mountain lion on base. So I've actually had more chance of encountering a mountain lion here than I ever had in Omaha. This is another quote from a person. My daughter and I were deer hunting, and I watched as 3 coyotes picked up her scent. One of them circled through the woods, showing up in front of her tree stand, expecting to catch her on the ground. And again, this is that loaded bias language. This person says this coyote, that was what it was expecting. The other 2 had followed her track in a classic flush and ambush scenario that canines have been using since the beginning of time. And when she tried to get a shot at the one near her tree stand, he saw her, yelped, and took off, causing the other 2 to run also. Now, again, that classic flush and ambush scenario that kind of implies that these coyotes were hunting her, that they were going to eat her. This guy knows what they were expecting, that they were expecting to catch her on the ground. So we got all that loaded language, and there's a lot of myths showing up in these quotes. This is another one, and I like this one, or I appreciate this one because the person is actually defending coyotes, and still they get so much wrong. So they were responding to a comment where somebody said that coyotes can and will kill people. And this person said, ha ha ha, can and will, laughed at that comment, said they generally, and all the errors in this one are theirs. They generally do not attack humans at all. They're actually known to be quite lazy. They were released in my area to control deer, and they can't be bothered. Deer are fast and agile. They like easy prey. So definitely more likely to lure a dog than to attack a human. Not saying they're not dangerous, of course they are, but I grew up in a rural area, and we would see hundreds of eyes in the fields 100 feet away. That's my favorite part of this. Hundreds of eyes. We'll get to why that's funny. And not once in 30 plus years did one try to even come close enough to be a risk. A raccoon is more worrisome. So this person is, like I said, they're defending coyotes. They're actually pro coyote, and yet they reinforce a lot of the myths that we're going to be talking about today, or that, well, I'm going to be talking about today because you're not here. But, we're going to talk about a lot of these myths. So what are we talking about? What's the animal that we're talking about? So about 1.5 feet tall, 4 feet long, 20 to 50 pounds with a narrow snout. I'm going to stop my screen share here for just a second. Oop. It's been a while since I've used Zoom. So I just want to show you, I have my coyote pelt here. This is Calamity Coyote. Calamity Coyote was killed in Virginia. I don't kill any animals for use in my programs, but I will salvage them if I find them. So you can see Calamity's not all that big. Nose to tail, I'd say maybe 4 feet long. And this was a full-grown adult coyote. So really about the size of maybe a medium-sized dog. I had a Australian Shepherd. She was about the same size. So 20 to 50 pounds, 1.5 feet tall. So they're distributed throughout North America, throughout the United States, Mexico, Central America, up into Alaska. They're very widely distributed. They survive very well even in urban areas. So they do quite well in cities. They do well in parks. They live throughout the United States. Now, it wasn't always the case. And again, that's something we're going to get to. But this is where they're distributed now. This is where you'll find coyotes. Generally, coyotes hunt either singly or maybe in pairs. They're opportunistic hunters. They'll eat almost anything, but typical prey is less than 25 pounds. So things like squirrels and rabbits and rodents and even fish, if they can get them, frogs. Deer, fawns are more likely. They're more likely to take fawns because fawns, of course, are smaller. They'll also take birds. They'll eat insects. They'll eat snakes, fruit. carrion, they'll scavenge on things that have been road killed. And then of course, human leftovers and trash. So they like I said, they're opportunistic. They have a very generalist diet. There's a lot of things that they'll eat. So let's get into some of these claims. So people like to claim that in parts of North America, coyotes are invasive and they're not native. Now, the truth is that prior to the arrival of Europeans, coyotes were restricted to the Great Plains and the desert Southwest. So this kind of middle area of the country. Coyotes are suppressed by wolves. We found that out when we reintroduced, when we removed wolves from Yellowstone, the coyote population exploded because they became the top predator. When we reintroduced wolves into that ecosystem, within 2 years, the coyote population was cut in half. So coyotes are suppressed by wolves. Wolves will actually kill them. But so as we eliminated wolves, and we by we I mean European settlers, as they eliminated wolves, the coyotes naturally expanded their range. It opened up a suitable habitat for them, and they just expanded. So they went up over the Great Lakes, they went over the mountains into California, and they went through the southeast. So like I said, this diet of smaller animals and their hunting style, because wolves hunt big game and they hunt them as a pack, coyotes hunt much smaller game and they hunt singly in pairs. It made them more adaptable, more able to exploit these things. So, are they invasive? I would say no. They naturally expanded their range in the absence of wolves. Invasive kind of implies that they were either accidentally released or that they were transported there and released. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So they don't really have a detrimental impact on other species. So I don't consider them invasive. So whether or not you consider them invasive kind of depends on your definition. So this is the other claim, and you saw this a little bit, that coyotes have been introduced in places in order to control deer and feral cats and other species. This quote up in the upper left-hand corner, I responded to somebody saying that, coyotes are not an invasive species. Feral and free-roaming cats are, but this lady said cats are not an invasive species. If any of the animals mentioned, it's the coyote. They've infiltrated our part of the country with help from our government to help cut down the deer population so the insurance companies don't have to pay out and thus charge less, so they say. Now, this is kind of a common claim that coyotes have been introduced into different areas. I've heard this claim about deer in Virginia and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I've heard it about raccoons in a particular cemetery in Chicago, and about feral cats in California. So what I found out was, because when people make this claim, I say, hey, can you show me some documentation? Because if this is true, I'd love to read about it, because I have my own thoughts and opinions on that. But it seems to be one of those things that everybody knows, but nobody knows where they heard it or where they saw it. I actually had somebody, when I was discussing this, I said, hey, that's interesting. Can you get some documentation on that? Because I searched the internet and I can't find anything that says that it's ever been done, that coyotes were ever released as a wildlife management tool. And this person said, now that you mention it, you're right. I don't think I've ever seen it actually written. It's just something I've always heard and always been told. So, and interestingly, when we were talking about this, came up about the cemetery in Chicago supposedly releasing coyotes to control raccoons. And the person said, it's true. I looked it up. And here's a link to the article. And so I went to the article. And what the article actually said was, the people in the cemetery said, yeah, we've heard that too, but wildlife officials assure us that that's not the case. So even the article that they were citing as proof that this has happened said this didn't happen. So I say that this falls in the squarely in the urban legend slash conspiracy theory kind of realm. That this is, like I said, it's one of those things that everybody seems to know, but nobody can actually produce any documentation. And that's probably okay, because this would be a terrible, terrible wildlife management strategy. First of all, deer, like I said, coyotes will take deer fawns more often than adult deer. They don't really prey on adult deer. So now fawn recruitment is the biggest factor in deer herd growth. So fawn recruitment is the number of fawns that actually make it to reproductive age. But for coyotes, that's a small window. It's about a week and a half in the spring where fawns are small enough and kind of fragile enough that a coyote could take it. So within about a week and a half or 2 weeks, a deer fawn can outrun a coyote. So that's it. Like I said, it's a very small window. The other 50 weeks of the year, the coyotes are going to have to eat something. So diversity of diet. Like I said, coyotes have this very diverse diet. They're opportunistic hunters. So they're going to eat a lot of other things. So it's not just they're not going to just focus on fawns. Now, when it comes to cats, the science is out on feral cats. I've seen some things that say they only eat like 3.5% of their diet is feral and free roaming cats. Another study said they can eat up to 46% of their diet. But the Urban Coyote Research Project, who does coyote research in the city of Chicago, what they've found is that coyotes and cats will actually divide up that territory. Cats will tend to stick closer to more densely human areas that coyotes will be more likely to avoid. So there's not even that much overlap in terms of coyotes having the opportunity to attack and eat a cat. The other thing, and I'm going to stop my share here for a second. This is Calamity's skull here, so I'm going to show you that. And this is a skull from a domestic cat. And I'm actually holding these nose to nose. This is not a trick of perspective or anything. You can see that the cat skull is not that much smaller than the coyote skull. So, and if you've ever tried to hold a cat or contain a cat that doesn't want to be held or contained, that's a high risk endeavor for a coyote. They could easily get pretty well torn up by a cat that doesn't want anything to do with it, or is defending itself. Now, finally, this would be a bad management strategy just from a PR perspective. Releasing coyotes into an area to control something else. People freak out about coyotes enough as it is. If they found out you were actually intentionally introducing them into an area, that would garner a lot of, I think, public backlash and outcry. So the other thing, though, I think is that this idea comes from a misunderstanding. Another one of the articles that somebody posted, I think, referenced the Urban Coyote Research Project, saying, see, they released these coyotes. But what it actually says is they caught coyotes, radio collared them, and released them in the same area where they caught them. So I think people hear the word release and they think you're catching a coyote from somewhere far away, transporting it, and releasing it into this area, when really they're catching radio collaring, releasing in that same area where they caught it. So you've probably heard about coy wolves, coyote wolf hybrids. And the claim is that they'll hunt larger prey, they hunt bigger prey, they hunt more like wolves. Um, so the truth about this is there's some truth in this a little bit. As you move from west to east, coyotes do gain some wolf DNA. So it maxes out at about 25% and 10% domestic dog. So now I said that coyotes are suppressed by wolves, but as wolves were eliminated from the ecosystem, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. So male wolves, in the absence of having a suitable female wolf to mate with, would mate with female coyotes, and they would intermix some. Eastern or northeastern coyotes, where this wolf DNA is most prevalent, do tend to be about 10 pounds heavier than their western counterparts. So they are a little bit bigger than those western wolves, or western coyotes. Now they may take bigger game because they are bigger, but what the research has shown is that snow depth is a major contributing factor to adult deer kills. So they're not just going out and hunting down adult deer in the summertime. There's no scientific evidence to support that. If a deer gets bogged down in snow, though, if it's an adult deer, they may take that deer if they can. So my problem with the term coy wolf, and I read an article by someone defending this, and they said when you have a hybrid animal, the animal with the most DNA, their name is first in the hybrid name, and the animal with the lower amount of DNA is last. But if you take the word coy wolf, that word is half coyote, but it's all wolf. So again, it's a loaded word. It's intended to sensationalize and I think to scare people. So I don't like that term coy wolf. If we were going to separate it out by species, Western wolf versus, or Western coyote versus Eastern coyote, or Western coyote versus Northeastern coyote, I would be fine with. But that coy wolf just, it grates on my nerves. So this is some of the research. The State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, they examined animal carcasses that were visited by radio-collared eastern coyotes during the winter and summer of 2008 and 9. Now, during the winter, only 8% of adult deer that had been killed were conclusively killed by eastern coyotes. A lot of times, coyotes get the blame for whether it's livestock or whether it's deer. A lot of times they find out later on that it's actually domestic dogs that are responsible, or something else that's responsible. So the remaining 92% of these adult deer carcasses were scavenged by coyotes. So the coyotes visited them, but they were already dead. The coyotes didn't kill them. So they had been hit by cars, or they had received other injuries. The adult deer, so back to the 8%, the 8% that were taken, they discovered they were already injured. So they had been hit by a car, but were still alive, and they would have died anyways, even if the coyotes hadn't have found them. So that's they're not hunting more like wolves. They're not more aggressive. They're just not. They behave like coyotes. So the claim here is that if you hear coyotes, it means they're hunting. I heard coyotes. They must be hunting. Beware. Here's what they sound like. Maybe. Well, I don't know why it's not sharing my sound. Well, I'm sorry, I cannot play this sound for you of this coyotes howling. But the claim is that if you hear coyotes, it means they're hunting. The truth is, that's just silly, really. If there's any hunters, if you know any hunters, if you're a hunter yourself, like you wouldn't go out to your tree stand to hunt deer early in the morning. You're trekking through the woods and you're shouting to your buddy, "Hey Bob, you see any deer over there? How's the family doing?" That's just advertising that you're out there. It's a you're ad the coyotes aren't going to advertise to their prey that they're out there hunting. The prey would learn pretty quick that if they hear coyotes howling, they better go in their burrow, or they better take cover, or they better get the heck out of Dodge. Howling is a form of communication. You know, coyotes don't have cell phones, and they don't have thumbs to text with. So they howl as a form of communicating with each other. They're saying, you know, "Hey, I'm over here. Where are you? Let's meet by the big oak tree." Or, "Hey, my group is over here. You guys stay over on your side of the creek or the river or whatever we've used to demarcate our territory so that we don't have an issue." It also turns out that humans are terrible at estimating the number of coyotes that they can hear howling. And this is um, partially because the way coyotes howl, they can change the pitch and the tone of their howl in the middle of the howl. So they did this study. They captured a coyote, okay, and they had it in captivity. They recorded it howling. And then they captured a second coyote, and they had the two of them there together, and they recorded the two of them howling. And then they captured a third coyote, and they did the same thing. And they took these recordings, and they had people put on headphones, and they said, "Okay, listen to this recording and tell me how many coyotes you hear." And consistently, people almost always doubled the number of coyotes. So if they were listening to one, they thought they heard two. If they heard two, they thought it was four, and so on and so on. So we're terrible. Yeah. So I wish I could play this for you. I'm sorry that I can't. But coyotes, they howl to communicate. They howl. Sometimes it seems just for the fun of it. It's almost like a celebration, or when they, you know, if after a bad storm, they're trying to get the family back together, the group back together. Um, you know, they howl for a lot of reasons, but it's all communication. They're not hunting. So now this other claim, and I've seen this about wolves too, is that coyotes kill for fun or sport. Um, you know, everybody knows about, you know, my uncle's hairdresser's sister-in-law knew a guy who said that coyotes killed a bunch of geese and didn't even eat them. So the truth is that coyotes don't kill for sport. No predator kills for fun or for sport. Wolves don't do it. Coyotes don't do it. There's only one animal on the planet that kills for fun and for sport, and that's us. Bad news, but that's something we do. Now, surplus killing, and that's what biologists like to call it. Surplus killing does happen. I'm not going to lie. So it's extremely rare, and usually it only happens in specific circumstances. So coyotes, you know, they haven't eaten in a while, and they get the chance to stock the pantry. That's what I call it. So they're not killing for fun. If they were killing for fun, we would see this a lot more often. But it's basically like, I haven't eaten in a while. Now I've got this chance to kill a bunch of stuff. And so maybe if I go another few days without eating, I'll have something I can come back to, something I can at least get some nutrition, some energy from, if I haven't had a chance to eat in a while. And it is more likely to happen with domestic animals, and in particular poultry. And part of that is because of the domestication of these animals, they don't have the predator avoidance instincts that their wild birds or their wild ancestors do. So does it happen? Yes, but it's very, very rare. So to hold these rare instances up and say, see, coyotes kill for fun or they kill for sport, I think is dishonest, because they're killing to survive, and it's a survival instinct. So along that lines, the claim is that coyotes decimate livestock, and the best way to control them is through lethal measures. Now, the truth is, they have, in the big picture, looking at their total impact on livestock, they have a very small impact. So about less than 1% of sheep, about 2.5% of lambs, 0.5% of goats, 0.02% of cattle, and 0.37% of cow calves are killed by coyotes. Now, I know for an individual producer who loses a bunch of livestock to a coyote, that's little comfort. I understand that. And there are ways there are government programs that can compensate them for losses to predation. And again, a lot of times these predation events are blamed on coyotes because they're an easy target. And it turns out that it's not coyotes at all. As far as lethal measures go, it's actually been shown to be ineffective, and not only ineffective, but counterproductive. So removing individuals opens up new territory. So coyotes from the group next door, now they're like, hey, I think there's some open territory over there. Let's strike out, and I'm going to go create a family of my own. Removing individuals actually increases the reproductive rate of the coyotes and the survival rate of the pups. So it's just, they compensate. And it's been shown that you can remove up to 60% of the coyotes in an area, and within a year, the numbers will be back up where they were. So with a larger family, coyotes need to eat or get more and larger prey. So it might actually increase predation on those livestock because they're easy prey and they're bigger. If you remove a dominant coyote that's not killing livestock, that could lead to younger ones that weren't killing livestock before because that one was kind of in charge and keeping them away from that livestock, to turn to those easier prey, which is livestock. And so round and round we go. It's a vicious cycle. Now, there's a lot of non-lethal ways to control coyotes or to prevent them from preying on livestock. Livestock guardian dogs, very effective. Those big, you get a big livestock guardian dog. There's certain breeds. Like I said, coyotes and wolves don't usually get along. Wolves tend to suppress coyotes. So if you have a big dog, much bigger than a coyote, that's aggressive, coyotes are probably going to avoid that. Guard donkeys or guard llamas. These two are naturally aggressive towards predators. The llamas will actually bond with the animals you want them to guard. So you want to learn more about that? There's a Dispatches from the Forest podcast episode, a recent one that is all about llamas and alpacas. And I talk about guard llamas. Electric fences, coyote-proof fences, or secure enclosures, particularly at the times of year when the cattle are giving birth or lambing. Motion-activated sounds and lights to scare them off, and then hazing, which is just maybe if you see a coyote, you throw things in its general direction, you scare it, you let it know that humans and human areas are not something they want to be around. And as far as cattle go, I actually heard a livestock, an ag extension agent on a podcast where he said he used to advise ranchers that if they lost a calf to a coyote, they should get rid of that cow, because any mother cow worth her salt should easily be able to fend off a coyote. And I actually, in a discussion on social media, had somebody say that, this is kind of going back to coyotes killing for sport, that coyotes attacked horses near them, tore them up, and then moved on to the next farm and did the same thing. And I thought about, well, one, a horse versus a coyote. You think of the size of a horse versus, even a 50-pound coyote, a relatively large coyote. One kick from that horse, and it's the end of that coyote. So I'm not saying something didn't tear up horses in his area, but I'm saying that the chances that it was coyotes are very low, because a kick from a cow, a kick from a horse is going to take out a coyote in one fell swoop there. So this was a quote again on a Facebook page, and this was actually the same guy who went hunting with his daughter and knew what those coyotes were expecting. He said, "We need to do something about that pack. If it gets too big, it will start to hunt bigger game like deer and pets and children." And I can't help but read that in that dramatic voice, because that's how it feels. And this was referring to, in Virginia, we actually did have a coyote bite someone on the trails where I frequently mountain biked, right near my house. Turns out it was a female protecting a den. And this guy, who didn't even live in the area, he lived 90 miles away. So I'm not sure, I get a little offended, protective of my coyotes. I don't know what stake he had in the coyotes that lived in my area when he lived so far away. But this is another common claim that, again, the coyote pack, as it grows, will start to take down bigger game. It's going to start to stake out the local daycare facilities. The truth is that a pack is a family unit. So you'll notice that I have avoided using the word pack up until now, because again, I think it's a loaded word. It's mom and dad, it's their offspring, usually this year's offspring, maybe a couple of offspring from the previous year. The average pack size is 6 to 8. And I'll just throw this out there. Beavers live in the same kind of unit. Mom and dad, this year's kits, and last year's kits. The average size of a family unit of beavers is 6 to 8. But you don't talk about a pack of beavers, right? But that term pack has some connotation to it. And again, average pack size is 6 to 8. So we go back to that quote I showed you at the beginning, where the person defending coyotes said, "We would see hundreds of eyes in the field, not 100 feet away." That would be at least 50 coyote. If they were seeing 100 eyes, 100 coyote eyes, you're talking about a group of 50, and that just doesn't happen. When the family gets too big, quote unquote, the children move out. They disperse. They go off to find territories and mates. So the ecosystem can't support a pack of 50 coyotes. There would be not enough food. Even a wolf pack doesn't get that big. Now, as far as your risk of getting attacked by a coyote, the average number of coyote attacks per year in the United States and Canada combined is less than 10. And a lot of times what you find is several of those attacks, several of those bites are one coyote. And a lot of times it's either injured or it's sick, because they do get rabies, they do get distemper. So a lot of times what you find is it's a one particular coyote. Several years ago, this happened in San Francisco. There was 4 or 5 incidents of a coyote biting people, and they were able to get DNA from the saliva from the people who got bitten, determine that it was all the same coyote, catch just that coyote and euthanize it, so that they took just the coyote that was causing problems. Now, here in the United States, we haven't had a death from a coyote attack since 1981. So the claim that they can and will kill people is a little bit overblown. And this death in 1981, it was a coyote that was, I believe it was rabid, and it snatched an 18-month-old. So a terrible, tragic incident. But again, if we were talking about an adult, if that had been an adult that it had bitten, we probably wouldn't even be talking about having one death in the United States, let alone that one. Canada had a death in 2009. It was a young woman, a folk singer who went on a hike. She was attacked by coyotes, and she eventually succumbed to her injuries and died of blood loss. Now, this is a tragic incident, and people like to hold this one up. They say, see, in 2009, this woman was killed by these coyotes. But I said, that's like saying, in Norway, there was a guy who was a mass murderer, but that doesn't mean all Norwegians are mass murderers. So, that was an outlier. It was an unusual incident. It was a pack of coyotes. Sorry, I take that back. It was a family of coyotes that there wasn't enough small game, so they had gotten really good at attacking larger game, so they might have seen her as prey. But again, that was unusual. It was very, very rare, and it was an outlier. Domestic dogs in the United States are responsible for 4.5 million bites a year and 30 to 50 deaths a year. And somebody said, when I cited this statistic to somebody online, they said, well, yeah, but you're more likely to encounter a domestic dog. You have more exposure to those. And I said, exactly. Your chances of getting bit by your neighbor's dog are much higher than your chances of encountering and getting bitten by a coyote. But people hate on coyotes much more. Lightning strikes killed about 300 people. Well, lightning strikes about 300 people a year and kills about 35 in the United States. So you're literally more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to get even bitten by a coyote, much less killed. Vending machines fall and kill about 13 people a year. And deer cause about 200 fatalities by jumping out in front of cars every year. So, that lady in Omaha who was, worried about encountering a coyote or a mountain lion going out to her car in the morning should have been more worried about hitting a deer on her way to work early in the morning, because that's much more likely to kill you and cause an injury. The other thing I like to point out to people too is that, Canadian coyotes and beavers in Belarus have the same body count. There was a beaver guy got bit by a beaver in Belarus and died from it. So, people being worried about being attacked by coyotes, like if you live where there's coyotes, should you be vigilant? Should you pay attention? Yeah, absolutely. But is this something you really need to fear? I would say no. So going back to these claims that a coyote was stalking me, the guy whose daughter was going to her tree stand, and the coyotes, followed her in this classic flush and ambush scenario, or the guy on the road behind my house that saw a coyote stalking him. This is a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what's a common coyote behavior. It's called escorting. So basically, a coyote will escort you off its territory, or it'll follow you. They're very curious, and they'll follow you to see where you going, what are you doing? Do I need to be worried about you? They're not stalking you in the sense of they're going to pounce and attack and eat you. They're escorting you. They want to see where you're going. They want you to leave, and they want to make sure that you're leaving. They want to make sure you're not a threat to them or to their mates or to their pups. So this is just a misunderstanding of a common behavior. Now, this is the final one. We saw this at the beginning in some of those quotes. Coyotes will lure your dog to the pack so that they can attack it and kill it. This was a quote from somebody it was a video of a coyote in someone's backyard playing with their dog toys. It was actually a very cute video. And this person said, this is a documented hunting technique. So now a lot of people, not just me, asked to see this documentation. I have not found this documented anywhere, but this person claimed with absolute certainty, this is a documented hunting technique. Coyotes will visit your yard for weeks or months to gain your dog's trust so it can lure it out to the pack to kill it. Now, coyotes are smart, yes, but they're not playing the long con, people. They're not visiting your yard for weeks or months to gain your dog's trust. That's the long con. They're not doing that. So here's what I tell people about coyotes and your pet. So first of all, if you have a dog that weighs less than 25 pounds, could they see that as a potential food source? Absolutely. I call it a yappy meal. So small dogs, yeah, they might be considered food. If that's something you're concerned about and you have coyotes in your area, there's a lot of ways, though, where you can protect your dog. You can keep it on a leash. They're much less likely to try and go after your dog if you're there with your dog leashed. If you have a tall fence, you need a tall fence. Coyotes can jump a smaller fence. Supervising your dog when it's dark out, dusk and dawn and at night, if it's out there in the yard, making sure it's supervised. If you're really worried about it, you can get a thing called a predator vest. And yeah, I should have clicked on this sooner. We're going to examine this from the perspective of your pet and the coyote. So a predator vest is literally this spiked vest that if a predator like a coyote or something else were to try and grab your dog, it's spiked, it's going to help deter it. Plus, it has the added bonus of making your tiny little yappy dog look, kind of like a badass. I'm not going to lie, like punk rock, baby. So, but a bigger dog, the reason livestock guardian dogs work is because they're bigger than the coyote. Now, here's what I tell people with bigger dogs. Is a coyote going to lure your dog out to the pack to kill it? The word lure, first of all, is one of those loaded words. It implies this plan, this nefarious intent, right? They're luring your dog out. But think about, it excuses your dog from any responsibility for what's happening. So, certainly your AKC certified Labber Schnauzer, Prince Little Sparkle Farts, would never do anything wrong. But if you think about typical dog behavior, if your dog sees a squirrel and it chases the squirrel, so we'll take a look at this picture. Would you accuse the squirrel of luring your dog to the tree, or a rabbit of luring your dog to its hole? Of course not. And if you take your dog to the dog park and it sees another dog, what does it do? Like, I had a dog that absolutely would want to play. Hey, who are you? Do you want to be my friend? So when your dog sees a coyote, so from the perspective of your dog, that's a potential friend. Hey, look, there's a dog. Let me go see if he wants to be friend. So your dog is responding to that coyote as if it's another dog. And let's look at this from the perspective of the coyote. Coyote's out roaming around and he sees your big dog. He's probably not thinking, hey, let's be friends. He's probably thinking, uh-oh, there's something that might be a threat to me. It might be a threat to my mate, try to steal my mate, or try to harm my mate, or harm my pups. Maybe it's competition for food, for resources, for den sites. So if your dog then runs at that coyote thinking that it might want to be friends, the coyote's going to retreat, probably. And where's it going to retreat to? It's going to retreat to the safety of its family unit. Well, now, if your dog continues to follow, there might be a confrontation, because they're going to defend. They're defending their territory. Coyotes, they don't defend territories as strictly as wolves do outside of the breeding season. During the breeding season, they're more likely to. Wolves tend to be more lethal in defending their territory from other wolves. Coyotes tend to just try and run them off. But if something happens and your dog gets injured, now the coyotes get the blame for luring your dog to the pack. The other thing that I have noticed, and this is a personal observation, coyotes that I see here will often see me from a distance, and they'll start to run off, and they'll go a certain distance. And I followed them, they've disappeared from sight, and I followed them up over a hill from a respectable distance. And what I notice is they'll go a little ways, and then they'll stop and they'll look back to see if you're still following, to see probably if they need to continue going and need to, continue to run away, or if it's cool and they can continue hunting or whatever it was they were doing. So this idea that coyotes will lure your dog to the pack just so they can kill them, I think is blatantly untrue. And again, it excuses your dog from any responsibility for playing a part in that behavior. They're just retreating to safety. They're trying to keep themselves safe. And then if your dog continues to follow, then that could result in something unfortunate. All right, so just to review, coyotes are a beautiful and amazing native species. They're just a caring family, and they're just trying to survive. They're not trying to eat you. They're not trying to eat your children. We can protect pets and livestock with just a little bit of effort. Easiest way to protect your cat is to keep it inside. They're feral and free roaming cats. I kind of touched on it. They're an invasive species. They're terrible for the environment. And I love cats. I have 3 cats. My cats are all indoor cats. And if your response is, but they really want to go outside and they're driving me nuts, well, then build a catio, build something where they can be outside, or supervise them outside safely. Livestock, easy to protect. I had chickens in Virginia. I never lost a chicken to a predator because I kept them in an enclosed run. I kept them safe. So if you're interested in doing some additional reading or looking at some additional resources about coyotes, The Ecology of the Coyote in the Yellowstone by Adolph Murray, it's a little bit older, but it's interesting. It's a great study of coyotes. It also set the scientific foundation for the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. So it's really kind of interesting from that historic perspective. The Urban Coyote Research Project is a great group doing coyote research in and around the city of Chicago. And then Project Coyote at projectcoyote.org is a wonderful group. Last thing, this is one of my favorite things about coyotes. This is not really a misconception or a myth. It's actually true that, what are we doing today, Mr. Badger? Crimes, Mr. Coyote. We're doing crimes. Coyotes and badgers, and this is one of my favorite things about coyotes and just kind of nature in general. Coyotes and badgers are known to team up and hunt together. So particularly like prairie dogs. And it's beneficial for both species, because when a prairie dog sees a badger, because badgers are such good burrowers, it will come out of its burrow, because badgers are, less graceful running across the open field. When they see a coyote, they go into their burrow because the coyote can't dig as well as the badger can. So by working together, coyotes and badgers actually do better hunting. Now, they used to think that this was just coincidence. Coyotes and badgers out in the same place at the same time. And so they do better together. But there's been many videos, many pictures like this one that show that they actually do this intentionally. So I'm going to show you just a short video clip. This was from a camera on a culvert in California. So this is cool. Now, I always try to be a little bit careful about ascribing human emotions and motivations to wild animals. But you watch this video, you cannot convince me that these two animals don't know each other and haven't done this before. So we see the coyote. He's so happy. He does that little play pounce. He waits for his friend the badger. It's just amazing. It's just incredible. I love it so much. All right, come on, computer. All right, that's all I have for this this webinar. So if you would like to support Dispatches from the Forest, I would really appreciate any support I can get. Some ways you can do that. You can listen to the Dispatches from the Forest podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. It's available out there on all the platforms. We've got 92 episodes out as of this recording. You can become a patron, find out all the information. Head over to patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. And you can, you get some cool merchandise with paid patronage. You can get coffee mug, which I really like. So yeah, you can donate via PayPal using my email address, which is dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com. You can also send me an email, give me send me a comment, send me a question. You can donate via Cash App using the hashtag Forest Nerd. There's also the Dispatches from the Forest merch store, and that can be found at cafepress.com/shop/dispatches from the forest. Click on products. You'll see cool things like this water bottle that I use all the time. We have t-shirts, sweatshirts, all kinds of fun stuff. Follow Dispatches from the Forest on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So make sure you click that. What do the kids do? Click that like, subscribe, hit that button down there and subscribe. So that's all I have for you today. There's only one thing left to say, and that's I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty.